Elizabeth, there we go. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to have you join us for our Tuesday webinar, Links to Learning, with our guest, Donna. I'm going to introduce her in a moment, but it is the last day of November. So tomorrow is a new month, but let's just press pause. Let's just take a moment and think about all of the goodness that had happened in this month. It feels like forever. At the beginning of this month, I was in Nanaimo, BC. I'm joining from Edmonton and Misquitchie, Waskagan, Treaty 6 territory. This is where I live. This is where I call home. But it's hard to believe, at the beginning of this month, it seems so long ago that I was in BC for a week. So just take a moment and acknowledge, the goodness. I always say that Creator is nothing but goodness. And so there's got to be, if you're living and breathing, and even in those dark valleys and seasons that sometimes we walk through as human beings, because we are living and breathing, and because Creator is all around, that there is goodness all around. So just take a moment to acknowledge this goodness that is in your life. We do give thanks to Creator for the gift of another moment, the gift of another day, that sun, even though I can't see that sun because it's an overcast day here in Edmonton. I know that the sun is there, and I know that Creator has given us this moment, has given us this day to walk in a good way, to walk in good relations, to walk with the land, to walk with the teachings. And we're going to just be able to listen to this knowledge that our guest speaker is going to bring to us today. So we're just really grateful and honored that you're here to join us in this moment. So we just give thanks to Creator for all of these gifts that have been given to us, that we could survive but also thrive as we go along our journey and honor our path. So hope you're well. All right, so Donna St. Louis, she's joining us from, is it Squamish, BC? Yes, I got it right. I got the honor of listening to this presentation last week, and she's full of knowledge. It's really good. So she's a business development manager with FNFA. As a business development manager, she is responsible for increasing awareness of the First Nations Finance Authority in Western Canada and the Northwest Territories, while supporting First Nation governments with accessing capital markets through membership with the FNFA. So as a member of the Coldwater Indian Band, she completed a Bachelor of Arts with the University of Victoria. We love Victoria, shout out to the island, and studied sustainable community development at Simon Fraser University. She has centered her career around supporting the social and economic development of Indigenous people on and off reserve. So she lives in Squamish, BC, the traditional territory of the people, and with her husband and two children, where they spend their free time exploring the mountains, like a gorgeous and coastlines that surround them. And she also has a dog. I'm a dog lover, so I just got to give a shout out to her dog. We're glad you're here, Donna. So today's webinar is, just give me a moment. So there will be opportunity. We had really good discussion last week, so bring your questions. There will be an opportunity for any questions or comments at the end of today's presentation. Also, feel free to use that chat box. I know sometimes I'll have a question and then I'll forget it. So write it down in that chat box and I will make note of it, because we don't want you to forget those important questions that you will have. So today's webinar is financing social, economic, and infrastructure projects for the First Nation governments. So we welcome you to this beautiful virtual community that we have here. We're really honored that you've taken time to share what you know and what's going on in your world and with the FNFA. That's a hard one to say, but not really. It really isn't. You got to just focus a little bit, but we're really honored to have you here joining us. And so welcome everybody. There is going to be evaluation link sent to you after today's webinar, so feel free to take the time. We love to hear your feedback. Take time and let us know how today's session went. We always love to hear back from you. So enough of me talking. I'm going to pass it off to our amazing presenter today, Donna. The mic is yours.
Wow, Michelle, thank you so much for that introduction and for starting off this webinar in such a good way. The energy is contagious, and I only hope that I can keep it going. So that's going to be my goal. Okay. Hello, everybody. It is really nice to see some of you and to know that you're here. And I just want to say thank you for taking the time out of, I'm sure, your busy schedules to learn more about the First Nations Finance Authority. I'm going to give a special shout out to Kristen Kozabak, who I've known for a long time. And haven't seen for a long time. And so every time I join these Zoom calls, when I see someone that I know, I get so excited. So anyways, without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by introducing myself. Well, Michelle, you did a great job. I'll just add that, I'm from the Nlaka'pamux Nation, specifically the Coldwater Indian Band. I'm not too sure if they need more water, Ken. Maybe we can expand on that later. Yeah, I'm just really excited to be here to share some information about the First Nations Finance Authority. So I'm going to start off by sharing my screen, and I'm going to share a video. And just give me a second here to sort that up. There we go. So when I first talked about doing this webinar, the way that I described it is that we wanted to share some inspiring stories about the First Nation communities that have accessed our services and our financing in the past. And so what I wanted to start with actually is a video. It's about 5 minutes long, and it's a video where we share some stories from 3 different communities who've used FNFA's financing to support their projects. So I'm gonna pop that on right now, and then we'll continue after that. Oops, sorry guys.
Behind every First Nations Finance Authority loan, there is a story to be told. For a coalition of 7 Mi'kmaq First Nations in Atlantic Canada, their story is about creating prosperity and charting the future they want for their nations. These 7 First Nations came together with premium brands to purchase a 50% stake in Clearwater Seafoods, one of the largest seafood companies in the world. Chief Terry Paul of Member 2 First Nation says this billion-dollar deal also respects and acknowledges their culture and their traditions.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime deal, really, to us, and it's transformational. I believe that without the FNFA, we wouldn't have been able to acquire this company. We wouldn't have been able to make this deal.
Hani, Huzu, Jody Anderson, Indigenous, Kuchiching Ndojabao, Ottawa Ninda. I am so proud to be the Director of Business Development with the FNFA and have the opportunity to work with so many incredible First Nations. Since the creation of the First Nations Fiscal Management Act, we have successfully worked with First Nation governments to finance over $1.3 billion in sustainable projects across this beautiful country.
I get to see every day the successes of this. I see schools, I see roads, I see water treatment plants. I see First Nations really getting involved in the transition from fossil fuels to green energy.
One extraordinary green energy project is a 300 megawatt wind farm located on and 50% owned by Henvey Inlet First Nation in Ontario. The wind farm is now home to 87 of the world's largest turbines and is powering more than 100,000 Ontario homes with clean energy. This project has created over 100 jobs and will generate revenue for the community and its members for generations to come.
These loans help communities to build the necessary infrastructure that's really required in their communities. It also enables them to really build on their economic development.
As the CEO of the Bayside Development Corporation on the Nlaka'pamux Mi'kmaq Nation, Rose Paul is determined to help rebuild the economy in her community. She keeps a letter from a federal Indian agent sent back in 1963, warning the First Nation that no commercial activity would be permitted near the provincial highway that cut their territory in two, aside from making baskets.
I keep that letter very near and dear to me just to keep my fire lit.
That fire has inspired Rose and her community to build the Bayside Travel Center along the new highway interchange at Nlaka'pamux with the support of an FNFA loan. It includes facilities for gaming, a service station, a convenience store, restaurants, and even a tourism center.
I've been telling other people that never give up on their economic development goals in their First Nation or any community development goal, whether it be housing or infrastructure or capital projects. It could be done. It's doable, and it's doable with the help of the First Nation Finance Authority.
For Member 2 and the other members of the Mi'kmaq Coalition, it means that future generations will always have jobs. Jobs that Chief Paul says will range from a deckhand to a CEO and a major stake in a global company.
We are owners and we are participants, and FNFA truly has brought us there. It is run by Indigenous people, so that's a plus in my mind.
FNFA loans have finance infrastructure, which have now created over 14,000 jobs and have contributed almost $3 billion in economic activity. For our members, accessing capital knocks down barriers and is a critical step towards self-determination and exercising our rights.
I see a great partnership. I see First Nations taking a rightful place in this economy and actually being a major contributor to the economy.
There remains a $30 billion infrastructure gap between First Nations and the rest of Canada, and an urgent need to build more housing, schools, health and water treatment facilities, and other economic development projects.
From the bottom of my heart and my communities, we thank you for working with us on this to see a long-time vision finally come to life. Thank you, First Nation Finance Authority.
Our success is due to the First Nation governments who take the necessary steps to join us. We have an incredibly talented team, and we look forward to hearing from you. So contact us today. We are the First Nations Finance Authority, and we are for First Nations by First Nations, and we are stronger together. Miigwech.
There we have it. It worked, guys. All right, so that is some really great examples of what the FNFA has done in the past. What I want to do moving forward is I just want to talk about what the FNFA is, what we do and how we do it. So a good place to start is talking about, what are we? We're a not-for-profit statutory institution, and we were created by the First Nations Fiscal Management Act. That was an act that was developed to increase capacity for First Nation governments and to provide access to low-rate capital. The FNFA is owned by its members, so we are 100% First Nations led. And our board of directors are elected from our membership, and our membership is comprised of First Nation communities across Canada. We are not a crown corporation. We operate completely independently from the government, and we're not a bank. We have different services and a different lending model from the banks as well. The FNFA parallels the provincial treasury departments, but exclusively for First Nation governments in Canada. And this is something that I think really draws me to the FNFA. The FNFA has a mandate to assist First Nation governments with accessing low rate capital. And we do that in a way that's similar to how it's done for municipalities and for provincial governments. So if a municipality or a city or provincial government needs to access a large amount of capital, a large amount of money for a big project, okay, like infrastructure or something like that, like a recreation center, they don't go to the banks to borrow the money. Typically they don't. What they'll do instead is they'll go to their provincial treasury department, or in BC, we've got the Municipal Finance Authority, and they'll access low rate capital with low interest rates through the capital markets. And so the FNFA was designed to do just that, but for First Nation governments. So it helps to level the playing field. There we go. So I mentioned the Fiscal Management Act. This is a really important piece of legislation in addition to the financing secured by other revenues regulations. So the FNFMA, is what we call it, received royal assent in 2005, and it was designed, those that made it and helped create it, they didn't want it to be imposed on any one community, so it's optional. So it's something that communities can opt into. The act, like I said, was established to promote internal capacity, as well as to provide access to low rate loans. And it really outlines the rules for loans that can be supported by property tax revenues. And there are 3 institutions that operate independently of one another underneath that act. So the first is the FMB, or the First Nations Financial Management Board. This is the organization that assists with the internal capacity development. And then there's the First Nations Finance Authority, or FNFA. That's the organization that helps with providing access to the low rate loans. And then there's the First Nation Tax Commission, and this organization is for communities that have a property tax regime. They would work with the FNTC in order to access FNFA's services and loans. Now, the Act, like I said, outlines the rules for loans supported by property tax revenues. But most of the communities that borrow from us, they leverage their own source revenues. 98% do. And the reason that they're able to do that is because of the financing secured by other revenues regulations. So this piece of legislation came into being around 2011. And what it does is that it is written and was created so that First Nation governments could leverage their own source revenues or other revenues to access the financing from the FNFA instead. Okay, so in order to borrow from the First Nations Finance Authority, a First Nation government first has to become a member. And it's really important that all of our members have the same level of capacity and financial administration strengths and strong financial statements. So there's a few steps that are required to become a member with the FNFA. The first, of course, is to voluntarily schedule to the First Nations Fiscal Management Act. That's required in order to access any financing with the FNFA, and it's done by submitting a band council resolution and a letter to the Minister of Cernak. So if you're calling in today from a community and this is something that you're thinking about for your own community, get a hold of me. I can assist you with this process. We have templates for the BCR and the letter. I can start to fill them out for you just to get you started. It's a really easy process. Next, once that's complete, then a community will work with the Financial Management Board to obtain and implement their financial administration law, or sometimes we call it the FAL, okay, and then also to receive the financial performance certificate. So these 2 actions will ensure, or they're created to ensure that the communities that access financing from us, in a way they've already been partially vetted, you know, they've demonstrated that they have strong financial administration practices and that they have strong financial statements. Once those 2 pieces are complete, a community is now eligible to request membership with the First Nations Finance Authority. And if you're located in Western Canada, you know, that's where you can work with me and I'll assist you with the process and try to do as much of the heavy lifting as possible. So we have a couple of band council resolutions that have to be drafted and completed and signed. And then those are submitted with the community's last 5 years of audited financial statements, as well as some additional documentation, depending on where the community, whether the community is ready to start the financing process or not. Once that's complete, you know, I'll submit a request for a membership review to be done by our finance team, and then they'll submit their recommendation to our board of directors, who makes the final decision. Yeah, so that's the process to membership right there. See here, our mandate, like I said, to provide First Nations with access to the same capital market opportunities that are available to other levels of government. We do this with 2 different loan programs. So the first is our short-term loan program, also called our interim or construction loan. And right now, the interest rate for our interim financing is at 1.75%. We're really excited about this rate. And just a few months ago in August, it was actually 2.4. But because we introduced a commercial paper program, which I can describe in a couple slides when I talk about that particular program. But because of that, we're able to reduce our rate down to 1.75. So when a community is borrowing through the short-term loan or interim loan program, they only make interest payments on this particular loan. Okay, so that helps to keep the payments low, especially if they're doing construction on a large capital project. The interest, it's important to note, is not fixed. So if it goes up or down, those interest loan payments also go up or down. The short-term loans are converted to a long-term once the construction on the large project is complete, or at the request of the First Nation after 1 year. Okay, so that brings me to our second loan program. It's called the long-term or the debenture loan program. So in this particular program, the loan terms are fixed for 10 years and the rate is locked. The projected long-term rate for our next debenture is 2.75%. And I believe the next one will probably be in early 2021. So while the rates are fixed for 10 years, and that means the principal and interest payments are also fixed for that period, the loan can actually be amortized out to 30 years. So that helps to keep the annual payments low if you spread it out over a 30-year period. Okay. There are no fees that FNFA charges for our loan programs. So we don't have any membership fees. There's no application fees. There are no membership review fees, just no fees whatsoever. We're a not-for-profit. Our board has mandated us with keeping the costs to our First Nation members as low as possible. Okay. Another feature that differentiates us from the banks is in most cases, we don't take collateral from First Nations for our loans. So our loans instead are secured by the revenue stream or the own source revenue that's being used to make the loan repayments. The other services that we offer include investment and capital advisory services. So for communities that are looking for a safe and secure short to mid-term place to invest their money, we can assist with that. Also, we have a capital advisory services, and really that's where a community will work with us, whether they're a member or not, and they'll want to know, how much they can borrow. So we'll do a review of their last 5 years financial statements and provide them with a potential borrowing capacity, just to give a community an idea of what they can potentially borrow from the FNFA. It helps with any capital planning or strategic planning if a community has an idea of what they can access in advance. Okay, so just a quick slideshow, not a slideshow, a quick slide with animation that describes a timeline of the FNFA. So you'll see in 2005, the FNFMA received royal assent. 2011, the other revenues regulation that allows communities to borrow using their own source revenues passed in 2011. 2014, we did our first debenture, which really wasn't that long ago. We've also received our investor grade credit ratings, which is a really important part of how we access the low rate capital. Because we have these investor grade credit ratings, we're able to access the capital markets through the debenture program. We've had some upgrades to our credit ratings. In 2018, the FNFA received an innovation award in finance, and in late 2020, early 2021, we hit a big milestones actually that used to be on here, and that was that we hit $1 billion in financing to First Nation communities across Canada. Around the same time, we issued our 8th debenture. That was $354 million at 1.9%. So the First Nations that borrowed with that debenture borrowed at 1.9%, and that's fixed for 10 years. And then just in September, we had our commercial paper introduced. That's because FNFA received a investor grade credit rating from DBRS Morningstar for a commercial paper program. And because of that, we're able to offer a much lower interest rate. So at the beginning of 2021, we hit $1 billion in financing. We're now just shy of 1.6 billion in financing. So that all of those loans have gone to support community projects for First Nation governments across Canada. So member projects. So our members will borrow from us for a number of different types of projects. We've lent to 78 First Nations across Canada since 2014. They've gone to use those funds to build new houses as well as some remediation projects. We've done 10 green energy projects. That includes solar energy projects, wind farms, as well as hydroelectricity projects. Okay, it's gone to help with the acquisition of land Some of that land may be slated to become reserve land again by going through the ATR process. And then the financing has gone to a number of different projects that are on reserve, including schools, wellness centers, rec centers, administration buildings, infrastructure such as paved roads, and then economic development projects, including a building supply center, hotels, grocery stores, and more. Okay, so here's a geographic summary of where FNFA financing has been completed across Canada. This next slide, how can the FNFA access capital? I talked about our investor grade credit rating. It's really important to the FNFA and it's really important to our members that we maintain and improve our credit ratings from these agencies. Moody's Investor Service has given the FNFA a rating of A+3. S&P Global has provided FNFA with a rating of A+, and then I've talked about the DBRS Morningstar. We've got the rating of an R1, middle stable trend for our commercial paper. These are really important because these are the credit ratings of our members, and it's because of these that we're able to access the capital markets through our debenture programs. So our debenture program is what I want to talk about next, because not very long ago, really, when I first started working at the FNFA just over a year ago, I really wasn't too sure what a debenture was. And when I looked up what the definition was, I didn't find it really all that helpful, like not through Investopedia or any of those. So I found that understanding the debenture process was much more helpful. So really a debenture is like a financing tool or structure. And it's the way that FNFA is able to access the financing. So we have our investor grade credit rating. Okay, I'm going to get my laser pointer out here. We have our investor grade credit ratings from the rating agency. So that's sort of the first thing that we need. Now that we've got that, and we've had it for some time, of course, the FNFA is able to pool all of our loans together. And we've got this nice little circle right here, which represents the various different loan requests that are coming in or that have already been approved and maybe are sitting in our interim financing program. So the FNFA pools all of the individual loans together. So one First Nation might be borrowing 20 million, and the second one might be borrowing 5, a third 50. Okay, once we have $100 million in financing requests, we can then package that up and prepare it as a debenture. The FNFA works to issue a debenture on an annual basis. So that's why in the meantime, we have to pool up all of these. And the debentures, in order to get the attention of the capital markets, they really need to be at least $100 million. So we need to pool quite a bit. Once that's been pooled, the FNFA board will approve the debenture, and then we sell it to our banking syndicate. And our banking syndicate is comprised of the big 5, including, or as well as Casgrain, Laurentian, and National Bank. And the banking syndicate has the connections and the systems in place to be able to sell the debenture to the investors. And this right here, this circle, that's where the money comes from. So FNFA does not have a large bank account with a big pool of capital that we use to lend to First Nations communities. Instead, what we do is we're able to have these investors provide the financing through the debenture program. So that the investors include pension plans, mutual funds, other levels of government, and so on. They're all looking for a safe, stable, secure place to put their money for a period of 10 years. And they come to the FNFA, or they deal with the FNFA to provide the financing. They know of the FNFA as a safe investment, which says a lot about our First Nation communities that borrow through us and that are members with us. The last 5 debentures that the FNFA has issued have all been bought deals, which means that there were already investors waiting to invest in FNFA's debentures, in FNFA's communities. So that's great. It means that the FNFA doesn't have to hit the pavement and go pounding on doors trying to raise money, nor does our banking syndicate. And it says a lot about the strength of the loans that the FNFA does and the strength of the communities that are members with us. Okay, so a big question that we're often asked is, how do we know how much can we borrow? And so a First Nations revenues will really determine its borrowing capacity. So the FNFA works with your community or with the First Nations community to identify potential existing revenue streams. So typically those are own source or other revenues and can include royalties, business revenues, contract revenues, transfers from other levels of government, or IPP revenues. Depending on which province our callers are from, I know in BC, a common one that we see is BC gaming, okay? Those revenues can be used to secure financing with the FNFA. The key, a few key words to describe the revenues and what we're looking for is that first, they should be existing and they've got some demonstrated consistency. And that's why we look at the last 5 years financial statements, just to see there's some consistency in the amount of revenue that's being transferred. The second is that the revenues are unencumbered or they're not being used for any other purpose. They're not being used to secure another loan, for example. And then the third thing is that they've got some longevity. There's an agreement attached to that revenue stream so that we can see that it's going to continue for several years moving forward so that it can support a long-term loan. Okay. FNFA gives a leverage factor. It's actually the leverage factors are provided by our banking syndicate because the banking syndicates are the ones that are going to the capital markets. We use their leverage factors, but each revenue stream that we look at has a leverage factor applied to it. And what that does is it gives us an idea of how much of every dollar of a revenue stream can be used to leverage and how much financing can be accessed from that dollar for over 20 years, 25 years, or 30 years. So with the federal or provincial transfers, if there was $1 of revenue coming in every year, that could be used to access $13.52 over 20 years. If we look at larger numbers though, so which I think is probably a better example. If a community has $500,000 pledged annually from a federal or provincial transfer, they could potentially borrow $6.7 million over 20 years or $9.2 million over 30 years. Okay. Now, the leverage factors are not the same for all types of revenue streams. Provincial and federal transfers are considered very secure, safe, and stable, especially when they're attached to a long-term contract or agreement. Meanwhile, band businesses have a different leverage factor. You'll see the band business at the bottom of the table there is 9.5 to 13.5. That's because the business revenues typically just have more risk attached to them. So the leverage factors and the revenue streams, they're all risk rated. Okay. It's really important that we talk about the safeguards that the FNFA is required to implement. It's required by the capital markets, but I think it also gives a lot of our members some security as well, knowing that we have a lot of measures that we put into place to protect the borrowing pool. So the first is that all of our members must work with the First Nations Financial Management Board. That's to implement their financial administration law and to receive their financial performance certificate. So as I mentioned before, this provides comfort to the capital markets, knowing that our members have sound financial administration practices and strong financial statements as well. The second safeguard are the leverage factors, which are set by the capital markets, which I just described. The third are FNFA's reserve funds. We've got the DRF, or the Debt Reserve Fund. And so this is used as a backstop in the event that a community's revenue stream is interrupted. It's currently above $80 million. And the way that this Debt Reserve Fund is funded is from our members. So anytime a member wants to borrow from the FNFA, they borrow an additional 5% on top of what they need. And that amount is then placed into the DRF, or the Debt Reserve Fund. Again, it's used as a just in case. It's never actually been used before by any of our communities. Once the loan has been repaid, those funds that were set aside in the DRF for that community, they're returned. In addition, we also return any of the interest that was earned on those funds while it was with us. Okay. The second reserve fund is called the Credit Enhancement Fund, or CEF, and this is at around $45.5 million. And this is where FNFA has a contract with Canada to assist, and it's used again just as an additional backstop. The fourth safeguard, our board of directors must unanimously approve loan requests. So our board of directors consists of active chiefs and counselors who are all active borrowing members. And so it's really important to them, first as the board and the leadership, to ensure that all of the loans that are approved are of a certain quality, okay, high quality, safe and sound. And then just as, active borrowing members, they are of course interested in ensuring that the borrowing pool is protected and that our interest rates remain low. The board of directors approves of loans, but this is after an analysis and report is done by FNFA's finance team. So we do a really thorough review of each application to ensure that it meets all of our requirements. The fifth safeguard is the trust account system. And so this ensures loan repayment, and I'm going to describe it in the next slide. So here's an example of how we process the payments for a long-term debenture loan. So if FNFA lends $1 million to a First Nation and it's repayable over 25 years, the revenue stream that is used to repay that loan, let's say in this example, it's $250,000 annually. So a First Nation will pledge one or more of its revenue streams to secure the loan. That amount, that $250,000, is placed directly by the payor into what's called a secured revenue trust account, or an SRTA. So the revenue stream is automatically transferred from the payor into the SRTA account. And then from there, first, FNFA is paid the loan amount. That's the principal and interest. And in this example, it's around $56,775. And then second, the balance is paid right back to the First Nation. So that amount is transferred back to the First Nations bank account, or directly to the First Nations bank account. Usually the entire process takes around 24 to 48 hours. It's all automated. And then the First Nation has control of spending all those monies. So the above process is cost-free to the First Nation. Administratively, it's very straightforward, okay? And then it provides a comfort that's needed by the capital markets, which is really important because that is how we access the low interest rates that we're able to access. So once FNFA receives the payment on an annual basis, we are required to pay the interest out to the investors, okay? And then we hold on to the principal. And that's what this slide right here is going to be talking about or speaking to. We hold on to the principal payments in what is called a sinking fund. While that those proceeds or the principal is going into the sinking fund over a 25-year period, let's say on that $1 million loan, the principal payments that were set aside are earning interest. And that interest is earned for the benefit of the First Nation borrower. So in this example, you'll see the orange columns topped with the blue. The orange portion is the principal payment that is received from the community, from their revenue stream to go towards that $1 million loan. The portions in blue represents the interest that's being earned, and that accumulates and grows over a 25-year period. So at the end of the term, the principal that's repaid by the community is $732,000. And this sinking fund proceeds is $268,000. That goes towards paying down the balance of the loan. So it's another way that a community can save some money by borrowing with the FNFA. And then just another way that the FNFA works to keeping the cost of borrowing as low as possible for our members. So what kind of projects does the FNFA lend for? This is according to Section 4 of the Financing Secured by Other Revenues Regulations. We are mandated to lend for projects that include economic development, social development, community-owned housing that can be on or off reserve, member housing or non-member housing, okay? It also can be for equity involvement, land acquisitions or purchases, infrastructure, water, sewer, roads, and so on, as well as rolling stock, vehicles and equipment, school buses and fire trucks. Okay, so I've got some time. I'm just going to run through a couple of different examples of communities that we've supported. This is the Chippewas of Rama First Nation in Ontario. So they've used FNFA financing to build a 36,000 square foot building for retail space. I believe it's actually nearing completion. This isn't a project that I've worked on, but I've been hearing about it through my colleagues out on the East Coast. Here's the Henvey Inlet First Nation in Ontario. This actually was described in the video that I showed earlier, if you were with us at that time. So Henvey Inlet Wind Farm, the Henvey Inlet First Nation, they own 50% of this wind farm. It's a really big project. I really like hearing about this particular community because it's been described to me, and in their own words as well, as just a true rags to riches story. They didn't, it's a small community, they're fairly remote, they didn't have a lot of own source revenues, but when this opportunity came, because the revenues were backed by a long-term government contract, they were able to use those revenues to support financing with the FNFA. So it's gone a long ways to really benefit the community. The Clearwater Deal, this was also discussed in the video. The Mi'kmaq Coalition purchased half or became 50% owners of Clearwater Seafoods. It's on the East Coast. It's a really large seafood company. So we're really excited about that particular deal. All four of those communities, all seven of those communities, they came together and borrowed $250 million from the FNFA. This is an example of a solar power project. I just wanted to show you what that might look like and give you an example. I actually don't know this community. I didn't work on it, but if anyone's interested in learning more information, I'd be happy to find out for you. Yeah, Songhees Wellness Center. I love this space. I don't know if anyone here has been to this space, but it's a 55,000 square foot multi-purpose building by the Songhees First Nation, which is located just outside of Victoria, British Columbia. It houses their governance and administration offices, local services. It's got recreation services, education, and health. It's just so much. And it's a really beautiful facility, and it's the pride of the community. Jackton First Nation in BC recently accessed financing from the FNFA so that they could build some housing. And it's actually one of the first projects of its kind. Jackton partnered with BC Housing, which is an agency, a provincial agency in British Columbia that provides housing, non-market housing specifically. So they're going to build 23 townhomes. It'll be mixed, including market, which means that it will be like rent based on market rates, as well as income-based and subsidy housing. Okay, really great project that we're super excited about. I believe they've already started to break ground on this one, and so the project is expected to complete in the summer or fall of 2022. TEMAGAMI First Nation. This is an example that I never get tired of talking about. TEMAGAMI First Nation is located in Northern Ontario. It's another remote community. They used FNFA financing to build a governance and administration and cultural facility. Okay, it's a multi-use facility, but they also used it to build housing for their elders. They did a 12-unit elders complex so that their elders could come back and have a safe place to live in the community. Long Plain First Nation borrowed from the FNFA to build the 75-room microtel by Wyndham. So that opened 2 years ago. Okay, so that's Long Plain First Nation out in Manitoba. Siksika Nation in Alberta used FNFA financing to build the Chief Crowfoot School. So the Siksika Nation had a school for their the children in their community back in 2014, I believe. It was flooded with the Bow River had flooded in Calgary, caused a lot of damage. And as a result, their former elementary school was rendered unusable. So they had the option of waiting for Canada to help them with building a new school, but there's a long waiting list and they would have had to wait decades. Rather than do that, and during that time, all the kids would have to be bused outside of the community. They took matters into their own hands and they used FNFA financing to build the school on their own. Canada is still on the hook to pay for it. It just may take decades to receive the funding. In the meantime, they've got a beautiful facility there. And then here's the last example, Salt River First Nation in the Northwest Territories. They used FNFA financing to build a multi-purpose business and conference center, another huge facility. It has 400 capacity, It's a community center. It's the pride of the community. And it also houses the Northwest Territories Courthouse, which is a nice way to bring people to the facility, but also it helps to provide some revenue, which is most important, or one of the important things. So there we go. I'm going to stop sharing my slide. There's my contact information there. I'm going to make sure that the organizers of the event are able to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. So please, if anyone has any questions, I'm all ears.
Wow, thanks so much, Donna. I always love to hear those stories. So thank you for sharing. At the beginning and at the end, I actually went to out east to, I'm gonna say it wrong. I'm gonna say it wrong. Buttonet? Did I say that right? And you had a part of the seven.
One of the Mi'kmaq Coalition communities.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you showed some pictures in the video, and it's a beautiful community out there. So I love hearing those stories. And then in Siksika, Chief Vincent Yellow Old Woman was in that picture. So you're doing some great work, supporting some really amazing initiatives in First Nation communities. So thank you for sharing what your organization is all about. It's so important. To do these good big things, we're gonna need money. So this is really important conversation to have. So does anybody have any questions or comments for Donna? We just welcome you to unmute yourself. And ask away, questions or comments, or maybe you have a story that you want to share as well. Not at the moment, it seems. Okay, so the first step would be becoming a member. Would that be correct? And that would be through you. That seems like it's a pretty easy, simple process to do.
It is a process. It's fairly straightforward. We have the staff on hand in the capacity to get as much of the legwork done as possible. The very first step for a community that is not already scheduled with the First Nations Fiscal Management Act would be to become scheduled. If anyone is interested in learning more, I'd be happy to guide them through the process. I meet with Chief and Council to present on the FNFA and help and as well as, senior administration staff. So yeah, first step is scheduling with the Act. And then after that, FMB for the certifications. And then I assist with the membership to the FNFA.
Awesome. Oh,
yeah. Hi, Kristen.
Hi. Thank you, by the way, Donna, and of course, Michelle. It was so inspiring to see the impact when people come together and especially pool resources and ideas and everything that has to happen for what we always call it the spirit of co-opetition. In some ways, we're competing for resources, and this removes that and makes it more of a cooperative effort. And I love that. But for maybe some of the communities that might have, they might be in the process of aligning with the Act. Can you just give an idea of like a general timeline, assuming that they've got some, fairly solid financials for the last couple of years? How long does it take? I'm doing some work with a couple different communities that might need to do significant reconstruction, shall we say, here in the Lower Mainland. And I think a lot of them will definitely be needing services. So, understanding I'll refer them to you. What's a general timeline? Do you have an idea of that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's a really good question. So for a community that is not scheduled, and actually there's a number that are actually, but for a community that is not scheduled, the whole process can take a few months. The fastest that it's ever been done is by Salt River First Nation, 3 months from submitting their BCRs to get scheduled to getting the financing. Okay. Now, I think in that example, the stars may have aligned and things just went really smooth. It was great. But the getting scheduled can take anywhere from a few weeks to 3 months. CERNAC updates or amends the act every 3 months or so. So that can take a little bit of time. Then working with FMB to obtain the FAL, the Financial Administration Law, and get the Financial Performance Certificate. That can take, a few weeks to a few months as well. And it really is at the pace of the First Nation community, because implementing and approving a financial administration law takes some thought and will probably require a number of different meetings. There are ways to fast track it. Some communities have used FMB's FAL template. So they have a template that is, I think the bare minimum, and it has all the requirements of what's required for a FAL. So a community can implement that right away and have it approved. And then they can always amend it or change it after the fact. The FPC is a review that's done by FMB staff with the last 5 years audited financial statements. So those things right there can take a little bit of time. Once a community works with me, we try to move at the speed of the community. So, getting those meetings with the chief and council to explain the FNFA is the first step. Once all the documentation has been received, which are the band council resolutions and the financial statements, it takes FNFA around 3 weeks to do a review and have our board of directors to approve it. That's to become members. If a community is ready to borrow, it can take another 3 weeks to put together all the documents and have it approved for our board. Yeah, thanks very much, Kristen. You're right. I love would you say the cooperation or co-op petition?
Co-op petition, I call it. Yeah. It's about competing. It's about cooperating to compete against other financial institutions, other lenders, the non-Indigenous community. To me, that's the spirit of what inspires me so much. So I'm so excited. I've known a lot about FNHA for years, but the presentation you gave just made a lot more of it make sense.
Oh, good.
So
Yeah,
absolutely. I would not be intimidated at all in sending some of the communities your way.
Yeah, no one should ever be intimidated. It's a lot of new concepts, and we all do our best to try to make it as simple and straightforward as possible, right?
Yeah.
And on the co-op, I'm gonna have
co-op petition.
Co-op petition. I'm going to have to write it down a few times to remember it. I think a big thing with FNFA, and it's one of our sayings is that we're stronger together, and it just couldn't be more true. Our members have to borrow collectively together. That's how we were able to get the investor grade credit ratings, and that's how we're able to pool enough of the financing requirements together so that we can access the capital markets and get their attention. Right. Yeah. Thanks.
Really great. And thanks for the question, Kristen. That was great. Anybody else before we move on? Oh, there's Ken.
This is just a comment. It's not a solution for the Coldwater band, but it may be an indication of where the Sumas band may find some solution. It was a dream. So after hearing what's going on in lower British Columbia, I had a dream. So it's a little far-fetched. The King of Canada and the Prince of British Columbia went to see King Solomon about on the plains. They're not happy. So anyway, thanks for hearing me out.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks. I really appreciate that. That's yeah. Thanks for that.
And Ken is thinking all the way from the east. So he's in Ontario.
Awesome.
So he's thinking about BC, which is provinces away.
I appreciate it.
Just one more comment. Just one more comment, if I may. I remember not too many days ago, Mark Miller, responsible for Crown Indigenous Relations, saying that he was going to give land back. Well, how about giving some of the lake back? So hold their feet to the fire. I mean, they say these things. They'd have to do something. They have to spend money. So why not make everybody happy? Hey, there's going to be storms and there's going to be floods, but you know what? Retrace your steps and put their feet to the fire. make them do something. Thanks for hearing me out.
Thanks, Ken. I feel like you certainly open, you potentially could have opened Pandora's box, but you're also, making a good point that of this land that has been given to us, and making a good point that to remind us to think about the communities in BC right now that are struggling, and the families, and the what's happening with the land out there as well. So we do want to take a moment and offer our prayers, our good intentions, because BC has been hit hard this year with the fires, the flooding, and some of that, I don't know, I cannot pronounce the name properly, but some of the warriors who are protecting the land out in BC. And so some of those stories that are coming out of that area. So we really do think of BC, and we offer our prayers, because there are all of our relations, even this land that we live on, the waters, it's part of who we are. So we offer prayers, and we ask Creator for that healing. So thank you for reminding us, Ken, that we got to remember the struggle that, people in BC are facing. And yes, go, Kirsten, go.
And I have a quick comment on that, actually, too. A friend of mine who relocated to Algonquin territory, just outside of Ottawa, she went to renew her house insurance, and they literally said, "You're on a floodplain. We are not renewing insurances. We're going to have to reassess everything for next year." And this was even before our last 3 weeks of chaos out here in Coast Salish territory. So it's going to be a national issue. So
It's Ken again. There was a comment about the researcher that wrote the book about the Sumas Lake. He says they didn't build in a floodplain. They'll build in the lake bottom. So they're not in a floodplain, they're in a lake bottom.
Well, thank you, Ken, for lending your thoughts on the matter. Donna, thank you so much for just offering your wisdom, your guidance, your knowledge this afternoon. It is hopeful. We hear, we've kind of left it on a sad note, the struggles that we see all across Canada, all across the lands. But there's hope, in what services you provide. There's potential there, and like Kristen said, you make it so inclusive. Like, you bring that language, because it can be intimidating. So thank you for bringing it and helping us to understand what it is that you do, how it is that you help and offer, and what you bring to the table, because it is needed. Housing is needed. Creating those wellness centers, all of those pieces are so important for the wellness of our community. So thank you so much for all that you do. And thank you for taking time to tell us and inspire us. I know sometimes it's hard to get inspired around economics and money and finance, but you've been inspired.
I love this stuff now.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
We honor you, and we honor all of you who've joined us this afternoon, and we hope to see you back. So as you go on with the rest of your day, we finish this month out, and tomorrow we wake up. It's a new month. December is here. A season is beginning to change. May you just embrace wherever you are in your journey. May you embrace this new month that has been given to us. Well, hasn't quite been given to us yet when we wake up tomorrow, but be grateful in all that you do. So we thank you for being here, and have a good rest of the day. Peace, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.